My name is Holly. I'm 33 years old. And on Thanksgiving Day, I walked back into my parents' house with a bag of groceries and found my 9-year-old son humiliated in front of the entire family. It was the sound that hit me first. High-pitched laughter. The rapid-fire click of phones recording. My niece is chanting like it was a playground game. And then I saw him. Nate, my sweet, gentle boy, dressed in one of my mother's old pink gowns, drowning in sequins. His face smeared with red lipstick that bled into the corners of his mouth. Blush slapped across his cheeks in uneven patches. A sparkly headband forced into his hair. He was spinning, wobbling in heels that didn't fit, trying to keep a smile because someone had told him it would be fun, that everyone was going to dress up together. "Spin, princess!" one of the twins shrieked. "Come on, give us a curtsy!" Lindsay goaded, holding her phone high to capture every second. And Nayat, my son, who has never once spoken back to an adult, looked straight at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Mom!" His voice cracked. A question, a rescue. The bag slipped from my hand. A jar shattered on the tile, sharp and final. But the laughter didn't stop. Kristen smirked. "Oh, don't be so uptight, Holly." "It's just a joke. He looks adorable, doesn't he?" "Better behaved than any of our girls," Lindsay added, her voice sharp with spite. "Maybe this is who he was meant to be." A ripple went through the room. Some cousins snickered. Others looked away, embarrassed. No one moved. My mother finally stepped forward, pressing her pearls against her chest like a shield. "Girls," she said gently, but not to me, to them, to Kristen and Lindsay. "I know it got a little carried away, but it's all in good fun. Don't overreact, Holly. Don't overreact." My son was shaking, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, mascara running down his cheeks with fresh tears. I wanted my father to step in, to slam his fist on the table, to say what this was: cruelty, bullying, betrayal. But he only stood frozen by the fireplace, eyes darting between me and my sisters, as if silence might somehow balance the scales. "Take a picture of his face." One of the twins giggled. "He's crying," squealed Millie, and my sisters laughed louder. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Every memory of their little jokes at my expense, cutting up my prom dress, lying to boyfriends, spilling wine on purpose, rushed back like a flood. Except this time, it wasn't me. It was my child. I stepped forward, pulled the headband off Nate's head, and wrapped him in my arms. He buried his face against me, sobbing into my sweater. "Enough," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to slice the air. "This isn't funny. This is abuse." Kristen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Don't be so dramatic. He'll laugh about it later." "No, he won't," I shot back. "And neither will I." The room stilled. For the first time all day, people stopped pretending not to see. They watched me carry my son toward the door, sequins shedding from the dress like broken promises. Behind me, my mother called out, "If you leave now, Holly, don't bother coming back." Family loyalty matters. Family loyalty, that's what she called it. Forcing my son into a dress, painting his face, and laughing while he cried. I didn't answer. I just tightened my grip on Knight and kept walking. Because there are moments you can pinpoint as the exact second your old life ends and a new one begins. For me, it was the moment my sisters turned my child into their joke, and my mother defended them. That was the day I stopped believing blood was thicker than love. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between your family's approval and your child's dignity? Would you stay at that table and smile through it? Or would you walk out the door like I did? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because this was only the beginning. I grew up in a house where laughter was always louder when it wasn't mine. For as long as I can remember, I was the other one in my family, the quiet shadow standing beside my louder, shinier sisters, the quiet one, the reserved one, the one who, according to my mother, had my father's serious eyes and his inconvenient silence. But my sisters, Kristen and Lindsay, were the shining stars. Kristen, the eldest, was bold, confident, with a voice that could cut glass, and a smile that convinced adults she was charming instead of cruel. Lindsay, 3 years younger than me, played the perfect sidekick, imitating Kristen, laughing at her jokes, joining in whenever the target was me. I learned early that if there was a prank, I would be the punchline. If something went missing, it would somehow appear in my room. If there was blame to assign, my mother's eyes would find me, not them. When I was 9, Kristen cut the hair off my favorite doll and left it in my desk drawer. When I cried, she swore she'd never touched it. Lindsay backed her up, swearing she had been with her the whole time. My mother sighed, exasperated, as if my tears were the real crime. Holly, stop being so dramatic. Dolls don't matter. Your sisters were just playing. Just playing, that was always the excuse. At 12, I saved my allowance for weeks to buy a new dress for the school dance. I kept it hidden in the back of my closet, tags still on, untouched, waiting for the night. 2 days before the dance, I came home to find the dress shredded, ripped straight down the middle, the fabric dangling like a corpse. Kristen was on the porch filing her nails while Lindsay giggled behind her hand. I ran to my mother, holding the ruined dress in trembling fingers. Look what they did. But my mother only shook her head, her blonde hair falling over her perfect face. Really, Holly, you need to control your temper. You can't keep accusing your sisters every time something goes wrong. Why would they destroy your dress? Why? Because it gave them power. Because my humiliation was their favorite game. But no one wanted to see that. My father, quiet, steady Thomas, would sometimes open his mouth like he might say something. But then my mother's eyes would cut to him, and he'd close it again, returning to his newspaper or his toolbox in the garage. I used to think silence was his way of protecting me. Later, I realized it was his way of protecting himself. High school was worse. Kristen was already a legend, the girl everyone wanted to know. Cheerleader, homecoming queen, effortlessly adored. Lindsay floated in her orbit, the echo of Kristen's every move. And me. I was the shadow in the corner. The sister people barely remembered was related. One time, Kristen told the boy I liked that I'd been talking about him behind his back. By Monday, half the school was whispering about me. I walked through the halls with my head down while she strutted, arm in arm with Lindsay, both of them laughing loud enough to echo. I tried to fight back once. I told my mother that Kristen had lied, that she was turning people against me. My mother's response: Kristen is strong, Holly. She knows how to take charge. You should learn from her instead of always sulking. Life won't reward you for sitting quietly in the corner. But what she never said, what she never admitted, was that she saw herself in Kristen and Lindsay. The beauty, the boldness, the constant hunger to be admired. That was my mother's reflection staring back at her. And me. I was my father's daughter, too serious, too inward. A disappointment by default. The cruelty became tradition. At birthdays, my gifts would mysteriously go missing until the party was over. On Christmas, my stocking would be mysteriously light, while theirs bulged with extra treats. If I protested, my mother scolded me for jealousy. If I cried, she accused me of seeking attention. Once at 15, I baked a cake for Father's Day, all by myself. I decorated it with strawberries because I knew my father loved them. Kristen and Lindsay watched me in silence the whole afternoon. Later, after dinner, when I brought it out, the cake collapsed on the table. The frosting melted. The center caved in. My sisters burst into laughter, holding their stomachs, while my father tried to look grateful. What I didn't know until years later was that they had turned the oven dial when I wasn't looking, burning the edges while leaving the inside raw. My mother only said, "See, Holly, this is why you shouldn't try to compete. You'll only embarrass yourself." I stopped baking after that. By the time I was an adult, I had learned to keep my distance. But the pattern followed me. At my wedding, Kristen spilled wine on my dress. Lindsay told the photographer I wasn't ready when I was, cutting me out of family shots. My mother brushed it off. Accidents happen. Stop making everything about you. But when I had Nai, everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't just a victim. I was a mother. My son became the one thing I refused to let them touch. At first, they tried to act like it didn't matter. Kristen's girls and Lindsay's daughter were always the golden grandchildren. They got the best gifts, the loudest praise, the spotlight at every gathering. Nayat would get a polite pat on the head, maybe a coloring book, while the others unwrapped gaming consoles and sparkling new clothes. Yet somehow Nayat's kindness, His politeness, his gentle spirit drew people in anyway. Teachers adored him. Neighbors praised him. Even at family dinners, distant relatives would lean down and say, "What a thoughtful boy you've raised, Holly." And my sisters hated it. They hated that their daughters, loud and spoiled and competitive, were overshadowed by a 9-year-old boy with quiet eyes and a good heart. I recognized the look in their faces, the same one my mother had given me my whole life whenever someone dared to admire me. Why her? Why not me? That's why the prank wasn't an accident. It wasn't harmless fun. It was the natural end of a lifetime of cruelty. The sisters who cut my dress, who stole my boyfriends, who laughed while I cried, finally found a new target: my son. And this time, I wasn't going to let them win. When people talk about love at first sight, I used to roll my eyes. It sounded like something out of a paperback romance, not real life. But then I met Adam. He wasn't flashy like the boys Kristen used to parade around. He wasn't loud like the men Lindsay chased. He was quiet, steady, with that kind of smile that made you feel like the only person in the room. I met him at a friend's barbecue when I was 21. He offered me a plate, asked me if I liked mustard or ketchup, and by the end of the night, I realized he'd asked more questions about me than anyone in my life ever had. 2 years later, we were married. Not a grand event, certainly not the spectacle my sisters would have demanded for themselves, but perfect for us. A small church, a simple white dress, Adam's hand in mine. For the first time, I felt like I was someone's choice, not an afterthought. When I told him I was pregnant, he cried before I did. He lifted me off the kitchen floor, spun me around, and whispered against my neck, "We're going to be a family, Hall." Our family. Those months were some of the happiest of my life. Every kick, every craving, every tiny ultrasound picture, Adam celebrated like it was a miracle. And to me it was. I wasn't just the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister. I was a wife, a soon-to-be mother, and I was loved. The night Nayat was born, the world felt brand new. I held him so small and pink and furious at the cold air, and I thought my heart would split open. Adam kissed my forehead and whispered, "He's perfect. He's ours." I believed in that moment that everything was finally going to be okay. When we brought Nayat to my parents' house, their first grandchild, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would change. That my mother would hold him and soften. That she'd finally see me as something more than the disappointment who reminded her of my father. But I should have known better. "Oh, he's cute," she said flatly, already asking Kristen about her wedding plans. Kristen, newly engaged, barely glanced at the baby in my arms. Lindsay was chattering about how she and her boyfriend were trying already, certain she'd give Mom the first granddaughter. My father smiled at Nayat, patted his tiny back, but even that moment was stolen by my mother's sharp tone. "Thomas, don't hover." It didn't matter that Nayat was the first grandchild. It didn't matter that Adam beamed with pride as he held him out to my sisters. To them, he was just another stage prop in a play where they were always the stars. And still, Adam and I built our own happiness. He worked long hours, but every night he came home and lifted Nayat into the air, showering him with kisses while I laughed at the two of them together. Nayat adored his father. Even as a toddler, he'd toddle to the door the second he heard keys jingling. We had barely 3 years together. 3 years of family breakfasts, of bedtime stories, of whispered dreams about the future. And then, just like that, it was gone. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the sun was too bright, the air too still. "Ma'am," the officer said, his hat in his hands, "there's been an accident." Accident. That word doesn't cover what it feels like to have your entire life torn in half. Adam was 28. He had kissed me that morning before work, promised he'd be home in time for dinner. And then a drunk driver ran a red light. In less than a second, the man who had been my anchor, my laughter, my safe place, was gone. I thought my family would be there for me. For us. I thought maybe this tragedy would force them to step up, to finally treat me like a daughter, like a sister worth supporting. But grief didn't change them. My mother sighed over the phone as if I had inconvenienced her. "You'll have to be strong for Nate," she said, like it was a chore she didn't want to discuss further. Kristen sent flowers, white lilies, expensive, impersonal. Lindsay dropped by once, left a casserole I couldn't eat, and spent the whole visit talking about how exhausting pregnancy was. Because by then, her daughter Millie was already on the way. Their lives moved forward. Mine stopped. The nights after Adam's death were the hardest. I'd rock Nate in the dark, tears dripping onto his soft hair, whispering promises I didn't know if I could keep. He was only 1 year old. He wouldn't remember his father's laugh, his hands, the way he used to hum while washing dishes. All those memories lived only in me, and it terrified me that one day they might fade. But Night saved me. He was the reason I got out of bed, the reason I forced myself to cook, to work, to breathe. Even as a toddler, he seemed to sense when I was drowning. He'd climb into my lap, pat my face with his tiny hand, and say, "Mama sad." I'd nod, and he'd press his forehead to mine and whisper, "Mama okay." By the time he was old enough to speak in full sentences, Nayat had become my anchor. He wasn't loud like Kristen's twins, not demanding like Millie. He was thoughtful, careful, kind. At school, teachers told me he was polite, that he helped other kids when they were upset. At home, he'd ask me how my day was, like a little man in a boy's body. Sometimes I'd look at him and think, he is Adam's gift to me. The last piece of the man I loved, the proof that what we had was real, even if the world tried to erase it. And maybe that's why my family resented him so much. Because he was better than the grandchildren my sisters had paraded in. He was kind without being spoiled, strong without being cruel. He made people notice him without ever trying. And every time they laughed at him, dismissed him, or tried to humiliate him, it was the same old story playing out again, me against them. Only this time I wasn't going to stand by. This time I wasn't going to let them break the only good thing Adam left me. I didn't drive home. I fled. The road blurred into a ribbon of headlights and wet asphalt, while Nayat sat in the passenger seat with glitter still stuck to his lashes. Every few seconds, he rubbed at his mouth like he could wipe the pink off forever. I kept seeing the room as a looping reel. The heels too small, the twins chanting, Lindsay's phone held high like a trophy. Somewhere in the soundtrack, there was my mother's voice, airy and annoyed. "Don't overreact, Holly," threaded through the laughter like wire. At a red light, I reached across the console and took Nayat's hand. It was small and hot and steady. "I'm okay, Mom," he said first, because that's who he is. It was dumb. "But I'm okay." "You don't have to be," I answered. "Not tonight." He nodded, eyes on the windshield wipers, on the rhythmic swipe. I thought it was a game. They said everyone would dress up, like a challenge. A tiny breath. When I started to cry, they said crying made it funnier. The light turned green. I couldn't move. I wanted to drive back, to rip the phones out of their hands, to knock the glitter across the floor until every shard of it cut the soles of their feet. Instead, I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel for a single count of 3, and then drove. Not trusting my hands, trusting only the promise that home existed and was close. At the house, I took him straight to the bathroom. I ran the water warm and handed him a soft cloth. "You can take off anything you want," I said. "You don't have to look in the mirror." He dipped the cloth, wrung it, began to wipe. At his temples, the mascara broke like storm clouds. When he touched the lipstick, the red bled onto the cloth in a single, perfect mouth shape, and he made the smallest sound of disgust. "I feel stupid," he admitted, voice small. "You're not," I said. "You're kind. You trusted them. That's not stupid. That's a good heart." He looked at me in the mirror then, bare-faced and 9, and I saw Adam in the set of his mouth, the way he squared his shoulders when something hurt and pretended it didn't. It took everything in me not to fold. I steadied my voice on the edge of matter of fact. What they did was wrong, not a joke, not a game. Cruel. He rinsed the cloth and kept cleaning. "Why do they hate me?" he asked, and the cloth squeezed under his fingers like a white flag. "They don't hate you," I said, and then I corrected myself because I promised I would never lie to him just to make the air easier to breathe. "They hate what they don't have." "What's that?" "People like you," I said simply. "You don't try to be noticed. You're noticed anyway." He considered that, chewing the inside of his cheek in the exact way Adam used to when he worked through a problem. I like being a boy, he added, almost shyly, like he had to specify it to undo the dress. I don't want to wear dresses. Not because they're bad, just not me. You don't have to explain not you, I said. Your body is yours. Your face is yours. Your clothes are yours. You say yes or no. That's the rule. No one gets to vote. He nodded. The last smear broke and slid away. His face came back into view. Freckles. The scar on his eyebrow from the bike fall. The softness that hadn't yet learned how to harden. He wrapped in a towel and I wrapped around him. We ate late something small. Toast, soup from the freezer I thawed on the stove while my phone vibrated itself across the counter. I didn't look. I knew the script before I'd read a line. When I finally checked, it was all there. Kristen. Relax, Hall. He looked adorable. Maybe loosen the reins. A string of crying, laughing emojis from Lindsay. He twirled. Iconic. He'll laugh in a week, my mother. This is getting blown out of proportion. You embarrassed the family. In the whole scroll, there was one message from my father. Call me when you can. No directions, no defense, but not a dismissal either. I put the phone face down and turned the burner low. Mom. Nate said, spoon in his hand, mouth still too careful with every sip. You're mad. I'm furious, Yar, I said. At them. Not at you, never at you. I know, he said, and the words landed somewhere deep and warm that I didn't know how to name. I don't think about them a lot anyway. That made me smile despite myself. No. He tilted his head. At school, Ms. Ortega says we can't control other people. Only our choices. So my choice is, I won't think about them in my room, or at school, or when I build my Lego city. I'll only think about them if I'm with you and you want to talk. I had to swallow twice before I could answer. That's a very good plan. He ate another spoonful and then looked up, serious. Are you going to do something? Yes, I said. The word surprised me with how ready it was. After I tucked him in, 2 books, a story about when he was born and tried to headbutt the nurse like a goat, the soft argument about whether the nightlight should be moon or stars, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote. I wrote what happened, every detail, while the sounds were still loud and cruel and exact. Who said what? Who laughed when? Where the phones were? How the dress was forced over his head? How the headband pinched? The exact phrase, spin, princess, that I would hear in my sleep for a long time. I wrote that he had said mom and that I had taken the headband off and that we had left. I wrote down my mother's sentence, word for word, comma for comma. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. Family loyalty matters. When I finished, my hands ached. I dated the paper and slid it into the folder where his school awards and our mortgage papers live. Documents you keep because they prove something no one else is allowed to rewrite. Then I opened my phone and watched the videos. They were exactly what I expected. Chopped, breathless, filthy with glee. In one, Lindsay's voice says, "This is so going in the family chat," and Nate flinches at the pitch of it. In another, one of the twins' hands comes into frame to tug at the dress strap when it slips, as if the party would be ruined if he escaped the costume too quickly. I saved them to my own cloud. I saved the metadata. I saved the timestamps. I did not reply. And while I watched, the second story formed underneath the first. The story that runs like a root beneath the floorboards, cracking the house you thought was home. I knew why they'd done it. Not because they were bored. Not because I'd overreacted. Because attention is currency in our family, and kindness is a tax they never learned to pay. Kristen learned early that being ruthless gets applause. Lindsay learned that laughing at the target gets you included in the photo. Their daughters learned the same lesson at 8. It's not enough to be seen. Someone else has to be humiliated so the light looks brighter on you. And Nayit, my bright, careful, gentle boy, was a mirror. He reflects what you are. To teachers, he reflects patience. To neighbors, he reflects curiosity. To my sisters, he reflected something they couldn't stand. That goodness can be admired without spectacle. That love can be earned without performance. They dressed him like a joke to turn admiration into mockery, to flip the room, to teach him that being himself is a risk. I promised the air he breathes that I would teach him the opposite. December passed quietly, and it was the kind of quiet I chose. I muted the family chats, turned on the lamps, and filled the house with just two voices, mine and Nayet's. Mornings were cocoa and wool hats. Evenings were Lego cities sprawled across the rug and books that smelled of paper and peace. My father wrote short messages. How are you? And once showed up with a toolbox, fixed a shelf, and left without trying to fix me. My mother sent sermons about family loyalty. I didn't reply. Every unread paragraph was a small victory. By mid-December, the neighbors' windows glowed with string lights. Under that warm light, the decision inside me settled, sharp and solid. If they had stolen Thanksgiving from my son, I would give him the best Christmas of his life. And I would do it in a way that no one who laughed could ever pretend it hadn't happened. The plan seemed to form on its own, like it had been waiting for me all along. On a Saturday, we decorated the tree. Nayet debated between a star and an angel for the top. In the end, he crowned it with a paper crown from a holiday cracker. He grinned. Let it be a crown. Not to rule anyone, to protect. I nodded. In that moment, I knew what color our Christmas would be. Pink. The very shade they smeared on his cheeks to make him a joke. We would take it back, turn it from humiliation into solidarity, and keep it for ourselves. I made the guest list. Uncles, aunts, cousins, all the people who, on that night, had looked at the floor or coughed or busied themselves with napkins while my son shook in two small heels. I wrote nearly the same message to each of them. Christmas dinner is at our place. You are wanted, but there's one condition. The condition? Come wearing something pink. A tie, a scarf, a dress, a blazer, anything. This isn't a costume party. It's an apology you can wear. If you can't, don't come. I sent the messages, sat on the edge of my bed, and breathed evenly for the first time in weeks. I called my father. I heard the garage door close behind him. His safe zone from my mother. Dinner's at our house, I told him. Everyone's invited. Except her and my sisters. He was silent for a moment. Heavy silence, but not resistance. I'll come, he said. Then added almost shyly, I have an old pink scarf your mother bought and never wore. Can I wear that? My throat tightened. Yes, I said. Thank you. The preparations began. Menus, shopping lists, plans. I looked through dozens of recipes but chose simple, warm food. Roast turkey with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted beet salad with pine nuts, cranberry sauce thick as rubies. For dessert, gingerbread cookies. Nayet cut into stars and trees, and apple pie that smelled like the childhood I never had. On the mantel, I draped pink ribbons, not loud or gaudy, but soft and steady. Each ribbon held a paper tag with the letter N. Our house had finally learned to speak. The night before Christmas, we tucked a card at the bottom of the tree. Being yourself is safe. Nate read it and hugged me so tight I cried without shame. Mom, he asked, can I wear the pink shoelaces? We had bought them weeks ago, quietly. Of course you can. Christmas Day arrived. The house smelled of cinnamon and roasted apples. I laid a pink throw rug at the entrance, a threshold that declared the rules of this space. I played soft carols with bells. I wore a simple black dress, a pink silk bracelet at my wrist. Nayet came out in a white shirt, navy trousers, and a pink bow tie. Is this okay? He asked. Perfect, I said. He straightened the bow and added, Today I'm not thinking about them. Me neither, I answered. Uncle Bill and Aunt Patricia arrived first. He wore a pink tie patterned with tiny fish. She draped a pink shawl around her shoulders. They both pressed their fingers to their lips as they hugged me, whispering, Thank you, as if I'd let them into a chance to make something right. Next came Cousin Rachel in a bright pink sweater, her husband in a pale pink dress shirt. Rob and Michelle arrived with their daughter, who had a pink ribbon tied into her hair. No one joked. No one pulled out a phone. They entered quietly, reverently. My father came exactly on time. The old scarf looked unexpectedly elegant, a soft peach shade. He hugged me awkwardly, patted Nate's shoulder. Then, for the first time, he crouched down to eye level with my son. Your bow tie is tied perfectly, he said. Will you teach me? Of course, Nate said, beaming so brightly I nearly cried again. When everyone had gathered and the table was full, I stood. My heart raced, but it was the kind of fear that demands you walk a tightrope or fall. I didn't invite you here because that's what families do at Christmas, I began. I invited you because what happens to a child matters more than anything else in this house. On Thanksgiving, you all saw my son turned into a joke. Some of you laughed, some of you looked away, some stayed silent. I won't treat those the same. Some of you already apologized, some haven't. But tonight isn't a trial. Tonight is a choice. I gestured toward the pink. You came in pink. Not because it's my favorite color, because you understood. Symbols only matter when they change meaning. They tried to make pink a weapon of shame. We've made it the color of protection. Tonight, it's the color of safety. The silence was not awkward. It was attentive, respectful. Cousin Rachel raised her hand like a student. Holly, she said softly, I want to apologize. I laughed, nervously, stupidly. I didn't stop it because I don't know how to fight Kristen and Lindsay. That's not an excuse. I'm sorry. And she turned to Nayat. I'm sorry to you. You don't have to forgive me, but I want to be someone who stands in the way next time. Nayat looked at me, searching for the rule book on forgiveness. I nodded. The rule was simple. His choice. Okay, he said, but no more Aunt. Just Rachel. It's easier. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Aunt Patricia spoke next. She admitted she had brought us blankets that night, helped us leave, but hadn't had the courage to stop anything else. Today I brought more courage, she said, placing an envelope on the table. Inside were written commitments, enrolling her granddaughters in empathy training, signing school policies on anti-bullying. We'll start with them. I squeezed her hand. Her skin was warm and porous like bread. The dinner sounds returned, but different this time. Forks clinking, napkins rustling. Not nervous laughter, but something like home. My father told a story about being mocked for pink swim fins as a boy. I quit swimming after that, he admitted. But later I realized the joke wasn't the fins. The joke was living so people's laughter mattered more than whether I could breathe. He smiled at me, quiet, regretful, but real. After the main course, I brought out a pink box. Inside were paper crowns folded neatly. Not to be kings, I explained, to be guardians. We all put them on. It looked a little silly and beautiful. Nate laughed, a pure sound that had no audience but himself. I knew then we had won something bigger than revenge. We gathered in the living room. On the wall hung a banner, "Being yourself is safe." My father stood next to Nayet, hand on his shoulder, Aunt Patricia on his other side. Rachel slipped her arm into mine. The house, once poisoned with humiliation, straightened into strength. Ready, I asked. 3, 2, 1. Click. The photo captured a forest of pink ties, scarves, dresses, crowns, each shade different but all united. I took the phone, opened the family chat full of old sarcastic texts, and sent the photo. Underneath, I typed, "We're doing fine. Christmas belongs where children are safe. Thank you to those who showed up as adults. To those who didn't, you are not missed." The replies came fast. My mother first. "How dare you? Christmas is family. Excluding us is cruel. This pink circus is your revenge." I answered with one word. "Boundaries." Kristen's reply. "Cute little show, Hall. Do the crowns come with your new throne?" Lindsay's. "Tell the princess he looked adorable. Iconic." I typed, "He's a boy. And he's safe. That's what matters. If you want back in our lives, come without an audience and without a performance." Then I blocked the chat. Not forever. Just until their consciences grew up. "What did they say?" Knight asked, peeking over. "Nothing important," I said honestly. "What matters is here." He darted off to hand out his guardian gifts. Gingerbread stars wrapped in pink paper. My father lingered in the hallway. He put one foot out the door, then turned back, took off his scarf, and hung it on the coat hook. "Let it stay here," he said awkwardly. "In the house where color isn't a joke." "Let it," I answered. Later, when the guests had left, Knight and I sat by the tree. The room glowed with lights, unpolluted by cruel voices. "Was that revenge?" he asked. I stroked his hair. If it was, it's the kind that doesn't hurt anyone, but makes everything clear. We didn't make them smaller. We made us stronger and gave them a mirror. He thought about it, then nodded. Then yeah, cool revenge. We ate one last cookie each. We ate. His paper crown was bent but honest like everything we had built that night. Snow tapped against the window, sketching new roads on the glass. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. My mother had written, "If you change your mind, the door is open." I smiled. Not bitter, not angry. Calm. I opened my notes and typed, "Doors are not open by default. Not until you learn to knock." I lay down next to my son. He fell asleep quickly, one hand on my shoulder, like he was holding the switch to all the old darkness. That night, I understood something I had always feared to say. Blood is not a lifetime pass into your life. And pink, the color they used to humiliate him, could become the color we saved ourselves with. In the morning, I photographed the aftermath. The table with crumbs of cinnamon, crowns on the backs of chairs, my father's scarf on the hook, the little card under the tree. Being yourself is safe. I sent those pictures too. Not as a challenge, just as proof. And yes, that was revenge. Not shouted, not cruel. Revenge is architecture. Rebuilding a home where a child's no is heard, his yes is respected, and his world is safe. Let the rest learn from the photographs.